Welcome everybody to Silicon Valley United Academy sponsored show on Bitcoin's back and other tales. I was going to put in other strange tales from the blockchain. So look at our sponsor. Okay, so Jeff, actually you guys need to switch.
Oh my goodness. We didn't plan this out. Apologies.
So remember these faces. So let me introduce Jeff Flowers. He's with Blockchain University and I guess Draper.
DLT education, as well as I'm a professor in chemistry, but when I'm not doing that, I'm teaching blockchain-related programming for such companies like Infosys, Broadridge, also for various banks and whatnot.
And on my left, your right, is Tony San of Lam Research. He's actually a Bitcoin miner designer.
Yeah. So the first thing I say is I am not a financial advisor. So anything you hear or say is up to you. Yeah, my day job is at Lam. I've been in the Bitcoin space for several years. So I like to give back to the community by letting newer people know about Bitcoin, because older people let me know about it, so I'm doing the whole giving back thing in a sense.
Tony often speaks at Plug and Play down the street, essentially a Bitcoin buzz, where he keeps everybody informed at the Silicon Valley Bitcoin meetup about all the hot topics and the discussions, and he always draws a lot of attention after he stops speaking. And I'm Jerry Fuqua. What can I say about me? I used to work for the Department of Defense in robotics and artificial intelligence, and played with dolphins also. So, and actually, I was involved with Tony 4 years ago on the Bitcoin miner, which was called Raspberry Coins.
Raspberry Coins, yeah.
We got funding, but that's another story.
That's another story.
So these are the themes that we're going to address tonight, and we're going to open it up for other themes that we can discuss too from the audience. We're going to start talking about, actually, I'm going to throw a curveball in here, where we'll talk about the scaling war, which has been going on between the two development groups over at Bitcoin.
I think it's still going on. Right?
Yeah, I think so too.
So
In a different way.
Yes.
Yeah.
The ICO market and how amazing it was last year, and the signs indicate that it's going to repeat, and what can the individual do about it? You know, how can they get involved or learn from it, or even maybe make some money from it? And then Bitcoin's back. We're talking about the blockchain that is still cool, and we have to address some issues like why are companies, so many companies seeking funding just by saying that they're going to have, they're going to incorporate blockchain in their business model. And how rational is that? So I'm going to throw a little curveball in here. I'm actually going to go right to ICOs right away. And essentially,
Actually, we should probably get a feel for where the audience is before we go that, because you might be throwing around terms that they may or may not be aware of. Right?
is everybody familiar with ICOs, initial coin offers? And you know there's been a lot of news about them, probably about the last year. So this is kind of the boring graph of capitalization. And I'll point out that Ethereum raised $2.3 million in its first 12 hours of an ICO back in 2014. A lot of people look at that as like the initial ICO that really started things running. But actually, there were several other companies that did ICOs, not nearly as much money. And it was fairly boring and not very impressive until last year. And then things really started kicking off. And for comparison, early stage VC funding last year was $5.8 billion. And the ICO market stripped that out royally, about 3 times more than that. Well, so here we're going to give you a little entertainment. This is actually a pretty well-known video right now, and I actually had music with this, but we're not going to play the music because Imagine Dragons Radioactive. I just want you to watch the total capitalization amount in tokens. That 0B means no $1 billion. And it starts off in January of 2014. And there's a color chart over here, but you really can't see it very well from where you are. But essentially, the first ICO started coming out of North America, the United States, later on Europe, which is blue, and later on Asia, which is green. And then some are stateless, so you don't know where they came from. Might have to. Oh, it started. Okay. Oh, okay. So, 2014, pretty boring. There are a few little ICOs, 8, 9.
Oh, we do see it.
They are coming. Yeah. Ethereum gave you the first big bump. I think it was 16 million. And it's still pretty boring. Not much is happening. That's why the public really didn't know much about ICOs, and people in Bitcoin really didn't know that much either. Then we started having in 2016. Any minute now we're going to have the Dow, $168 million. And then we have 2017, and things begin to take off. You're over $1 billion. Deals, KSOs, Bancorp, $4 billion, $5 billion, $6 billion. And that's where we ended in November. So, radioactive. So I just want to show you a few interesting ICOs before we start. Here's SALT, which lets you use cryptocurrencies to securitize for fiat currency loans, and got $48 million. Wax, which is actually a kind of a gaming allied platform, it allows you to introduce a marketplace for online gamers, $68 million. Status, $107 million, and that was in June. Notice the location's in Switzerland. We'll probably bring that up later tonight. Oops. Polkadot. 145 million. And you have a story there, right? Bancorp, which was very widely known, started out in Israel, but they're now in Switzerland. And they got 153 million in the first 3 hours. So the runway for ICO is much shorter than an IPO or private investing, which can literally take a year to get started. Here's an interesting one. It's a blockchain smartphone. It's actually a piece of hardware that's being designed, that's being funded. They got a good start at 157 million. Notice also Switzerland. And then every kind of knows about 250, $250 million for a startup.
Maybe we talk about this because, I mean, well, first off, Filecoin. How many people here have not heard of Filecoin or IPFS? So IPFS is an incredible project. When I first learned of it, it was just brilliant. IPFS, Interplanetary File System. How can you create a file system that could work across planets or across the galaxy? Brilliant idea, really technologically forward-looking. I would argue the second they raised $250 million, the project kind of stalled. Not because they didn't know what to do with the money, but rather, imagine if you were to be thrown in your face $250 million. Your work ethic might change a bit, and I think that's kind of what happened with this project. It's kind of slowing down. The rate of innovation has really slowed. They have recently come out with some interesting products or build-outs on top, but it's not nearly as agile as when they were a little bit leaner. So,
Like a true startup.
But after raising money, they don't spend money, right? Because like if you raise an ether, you don't have to spend it. You just raise and keep because the money is going to go up, and that's what I was doing. Like you mentioned, all the 200 million and 150 million ICOs, but there were a lot of North American ICOs which did like maybe 10 million in March, but they have a lot of money because the ether was very low at that time, like Luna, like
Kind of like hold them.
yeah, most of them from here.
Okay, so just want to point out that one of the big controversies is that these ICOs typically issue tokens, and there are actually 3 tokens, but the 2 most famous ones are utility token and security token, and the SEC is suspicious of everybody now because they feel that probably 99% of all these ICOs are issuing security token. And we look at the Howey test, and the Howey test you can actually address the third element. You know, investors expect profit. If you market that, if you promote that, SEC says you've got a security token. But they try and disguise it. That's why Harley Quinn is winking. Yeah, I don't know if you can see, she's winking her eyes. Yeah, it's a security token. No, it's a utility token. So here are our themes again, and I think we'll start with the scaling war. And Tony, you want to briefly comment about the?
So this is my take on it. The scaling war never actually went away, right? So the scaling war was this question about whether or not Bitcoin would scale, whether or not it could be used by everybody around the world. So Roger Ver has a good point on that. He says, well, he wants Bitcoin to be used by everybody, but there was a group of guys who said, well, if you look at the certain number of transactions that's actually taking place, and you look at the fees that are being, if you look at the actual